Hello, good evening, and thank you for joining me for another Lightroom and Chill, in which tonight on this live stream, I'm going to be using basically every Lightroom trick, pretty much, that I know in order to try and rescue what I think are some pretty bad photos that I took. Starting off, I have got some gin. That's pretty much all I need. I've also got Lightroom, here it is, and I've got a bunch of photos. This one you can barely even see what it is. It is a scene in Edinburgh looking at the castle. We've got this rather dull shot overlooking a road. We've got this, which we've just seen in the holding still before I went live. We've got this and a bit of this, which is not the worst, but it could have been a lot better. And so basically what I wanted to do is take you through a whole bunch of different tips and tricks and stuff that I use all the time in my own photography, and then a whole bunch of other tricks that maybe take the editing a little bit further than I would normally do in order to try and pull back, hopefully, quite a creative image out of what would otherwise be a sort of shot that you would probably throw away. There's nothing necessarily wrong with the images that I've picked out. This is a nice scene overlooking Edinburgh, but if this was on a day where there wasn't a lot of really good light going on, it's quite flat. It's just fine. It's a fine snap, but there's plenty of things that I want to do to try and take this a little bit further. This one, very, very bleak and misty day, and yeah, you know, I think there's definitely more that we can do to kind of turn this into a more dramatic piece, really leaning into that kind of mood and the mist. This shot is just dark, the angle's all wrong, but I think we can pull something out from this. Same goes for this. It's a bit of a nothingy shot. Tried to make it a little bit interesting by sort of waiting to capture someone walking across the road. So we've got, you know, a bit of layering going on, a bit of more interest, basically. Yeah, this one, it's fine. Again, same thing. I tried to get a guy walking in just this little bit of light coming around here, but we'll talk more about that. And then this one finally, as you can see, is far too dark. I intentionally underexposed it to try and keep some detail in the sky, but as a result, the whole image has basically fallen to darkness, which is a real shame. In fact, you know what? This one's going to be the biggest one. And I want to try and keep these streams a little bit more to the point, because my last one ran for about 2, maybe even 2.5 hours, and I'd like to do these every other Thursday, but not if I keep going to 2.5 hours. So let's crack in with this one. Actually, you know what? Let's come to this one later. Let's actually start with this misty boy here. A little bit of gin. I love a misty, moody shot. I've done videos about why I love misty, moody shots. You get so much emotion and quite like a spooky feeling from them. And Edinburgh sometimes can get some really great fog. And I headed out on this day hoping for amazing fog. And it dissipated pretty quickly, and we ended up just with a grey, flat day. In fact, that's when I took the rest of these. There's no fog in this, you know. So first thing, obviously, we head over to the develop module, and straight away I'm going to just start off by doing a crop on this, because sometimes I will leave the cropping till the end until I can get more of a sense of kind of what the image is going to be. But in this, I know that there's a lot of wasted space, and one of the details that I do like is having this lone figure on the bridge here, and I want them to be a little bit more present in the scene. All the interest really is the church, this street light, the figure, and this bit of pavement. But we've got so much pavement here, so much empty, boring sky with nothing going on. So doing a good crop where we're really kind of paying attention to those elements is going to be important. So I'm just going to straighten this up to about that. Maybe even bring it in tighter. It's only a 24 megapixel image, so cropping in to this extent isn't going to leave with loads, but it's enough that it'll look sharp enough on the screen, but won't be able to print it big. Already I think that looks better. I think maybe I could stand it, twizzle it a little bit that way. Yeah, okay, that's looking a little bit better. I'm going to up the exposure slightly because it is on the dark side. And I think I'm going to start off by really cooling it down. I think I want to lean into that early morning feel. And I think this was taken at about maybe 9 o'clock, which is not super early, but sunrise in Edinburgh in winter is about 8:30. So it is pretty early in the day. So we're going to bring that temperature down. I actually quite like the tint. It's neither too purpley nor too green, so I'm going to leave that where it is for now. But obviously all of these tools we can come back to. They're all editable later on. And I'm going to bring... The highlights I'm going to leave where they are, because that's just going to be the sky. And I'm not quite sure whether I want to darken that or lighten that yet. So I think for now, leave them as they are. Come back to it. The shadows I want to bring down, because that is going to darken down a lot of this around here. It's really going to help add to that moody feel. Of course, while I'm doing this, do please let me know how I'm looking, how I'm sounding. Got some comments already. Katie says Gin is a great start. It certainly is. And Danny McNamara is in the comments saying hello. Hello, Danny. As we're going through, if you have any questions about anything that I'm doing, any of the tools that I'm using, or any other questions kind of about how I use Lightroom and how that might apply to your own work, please do feel free to ask. Always more than happy to answer those questions. And if you're not watching this stream live and you still have questions, pop them in the comments below. We'll have a chat there. I will chat about photography for a long time. Okay, so where were we? At this point, I think I'm going to have another go through some of the other exposure sliders. And what I always do, and I say this every time, is basically grab each slider, pulse it up and down until you get an impression of what that's doing to your image. And in this case, it's sort of giving a nice deeper glow to the sky. I felt that the highlights is bringing it up in a slightly different way that I can't explain at all. I cannot seem to put into words, but I kind of like this balance now. It's brightened up the sky a little bit. It's allowing a little bit more of that sunlight to come through. And I've used a little bit of whites, a little bit of highlights. Okay, I'm going to bring the vibrance down and I'm going to up the saturation. And already we're kind of really leaning into these cooler tones, which I think is looking pretty nice. Now, the presence is going to be quite important. Anything with a natural haze, and obviously that brings our attention straight away to dehaze. And you think, oh, okay, well, if you ramp it up, you're going to remove the haze which is there. And actually, what I want to do is really lean into that haze even more. So what I'm going to do is bring it down, not loads, somewhere around, maybe just around there, -7-ish. Just a touch, but I'm going to lean into that a little bit more later on. Now I'm going to go to our HSL tab, our hue, saturation, luminance. That's going to let me manually edit. You know what? I'm not showing Lightroom, am I? And I've just realized, have I not been showing it this entire time? Have you not seen any of these photos? And no one said anything. Oh, I am good at this. I am so good at this. Has this honestly just been on me the entire time as I've been talking? And I've just been talking to the screen. Man, well, okay, there we go. Here's our image. Maybe I'm basically starting from scratch. Okay, here is one of the images. This is what we started with. This is what I've done to it so far. I have cooled it down. All those things you could hear me talking about, this is what I've now done. Here is one of the other images we're going to come to. It's boring. Here's another one we're coming to. It's boring, but we're going to bring out so much more in these shots. Here is another one. And here is our final one of the castle, which, as you can see, is super dark, super unimpressive, but we're going to do a lot to bring out that detail. So that was my intro done again. Now that you can actually see what it is that we're doing, that's a shame. It's a shame that no one says, because that just tells me that maybe no one's actually paying any attention. But that's fine. Maybe you're just here for the chill vibes and to hear me talk about how to use the hue, saturation, and luminance tab, which is good news if so, because that is what I'm moving on to now. Let's start off with our hues. And pretty much the only real color in this is blue. So if we grab that and move it around, you can see that everything really changes. And I just want to knock it down a little bit, -5, because it was ever so slightly on the purpley side. And as you can see, that has just shifted it ever so slightly into slightly cooler cyan tones, which I like. I also want to try and see if I can grab the yellows and the oranges and shift those down, because the only other point of light is these car lights, and I want to try and get a nice orange to go against that blue. Those are good colors to try and have. They are quite harmonious in an image. If you look at the color wheel, they are opposites. So it does look a little bit better, I think, being a bit more of a richer orange. Maybe a little bit less though, something like that. Saturation we can go and have a little play with, but I don't think there's a lot I want to do. Maybe I can boost that blue. It really is just blue in this image. A little bit of purple, maybe you can bring that down. And let's play with the luminance. We can up that blue that kind of punches up the sky a little bit. This purple, we pulse it up and down, we see what it's doing. Let's leave it as it is. Those yellows on the car headlights. Yeah, let's leave everything else. I think that's everything I want to do on the HSL. If we turn that tool off by itself, it's a small shift, but I think it's an important one that we've done so far. I think the next thing I'm going to do is start doing everything else with selective adjustments, whether that's using the brush tool, whether that's using the radial filter. So let's start off, and I'm going to get that brush tool. I'm going to reset everything to 0 by double-clicking on the word effect. And what I want to do is bring out a lot more detail in the pathway. And I'm going to do that actually by painting in clarity. Now, clarity is often one of those tools that there's usually two camps of people. One are the photographers that make fun of people who use clarity a lot, and then there are the people who use clarity a lot. But there's nothing wrong with clarity, but it's really about how you apply it. And if you use just clarity in the main tool and you just do it as a whole image and you whack it up, then things go odd quite quickly, and certainly in this image it kills all that nice haze, and all these details start getting far too crunchy on the building and on the trees. It doesn't look good. So instead we keep our clarity here at 0. We get our brush tool, we increase the clarity in the brush, and then we paint that in onto the ground down here. I'm also going to up the whites because I want to just get, it was quite wet and the sun is somewhere maybe over here behind the church, so I want to just emphasize the little bit of kind of ground reflection which was there, and kind of upping that exposure and upping the clarity is a good way of doing that. But that is pretty much everything that I want to do. Shy Violet in the comments says hello Shy Violet, and Danny is also there. Shy Violet, if you just joined us and you didn't see my huge error in doing most of the beginning of my edits without showing anyone what I was doing, which was very good. So this image is starting to come together, and I think maybe I'm going to put in a radial filter just on our little figure here. I'm going to increase that exposure slightly, increase the clarity slightly, and maybe just increase the dehaze a little bit. And I think that's just helping them stand out from the background. Before, difficult to tell so much, but before they were blending in a little bit more, whereas now it's just a little kick of light there, just enough I think, to help that figure stand out in the scene just a little bit more. I'm going to get another circular filter, and this time I'm going to grab that dehaze slider and I'm going to drag it down quite a way, because what I want to do is drag it right up and over the top of our image here, because I really want to increase that that feel of the fog, of the mist coming in. So really kind of leaning into that dehaze. You can see how much it's sort of muddying the details on this, exactly like real fog and real haze would, which I think looks great. The problem is that it's doing it equally to the church and to the street light. And the street light is actually quite a lot closer, probably about half the distance between the two. So I don't want it to apply to the street light. So the way that I'm going to counter that is actually just by getting another circular brush, and this time increasing our dehaze and putting it just over the top of the street lights. That simple. Basically just counteracting the first effect that we put in. I'm not going to go all the way. I think I brought the first one down by a lot. I'm going to just up it a little bit, so it's a little bit of haziness. As I say, it is further away, but not as far as the church. So it's a nice way of kind of sort of staggering the effect, basically, which hopefully makes it blend more naturally. So let's take a look at our before. It's very sort of muddy brown tones. It's very, very lifeless, very dingy all round, basically. Now I think it's got a lot more mood. If anything, I actually think I could stand to bring that crop a little bit closer on all sides, something like that. I just think, yeah, maybe draws the eye down. I took this shot because I like sort of shooting down this wall, acting as a leading line towards both that old-fashioned streetlight and the church. Having that lone figure in the scene, I think, really plays into this. And I could maybe play around with our other colors a little bit, and we can maybe go down to our camera calibration and see what the blue primary down here does. Dragging that down, it does increase the amount of cyan, but I don't mind that necessarily. Makes it a little bit more punchy. Frankly, it makes it a little bit more Instagram. And we can do the same with the greens. I'm not going to do loads with these. Again, what I like to do is grab those sliders, move them up and down, and see what we get. Now, if we just turn off the calibration tool, that is a pretty small shift, but it's enough just to give it that extra little cinematic edge. And to be honest, I don't think there's much more that I really want to do with this image. I'm quite pleased with it. It's gone from being, as I say before, quite miserable, quite dark and bleak, and the sort of shot that if you saw it straight out of camera, you wouldn't really bat an eyelid. You probably just delete it. On a normal day, I probably would delete it. But instead, what we've been able to do is just spend a little bit of time going through, making some adjustments, and I think we've actually come away with something pretty cool. So I'm going to move on, and I'm going to move on to this one, actually. This one doesn't need as much doing. It's a nice enough shot, but I went up to the top of Calton Hill where this is taken, hoping for really beautiful side light coming in. It was just after sunrise, and the sky was fairly clear except for where the sun was. It was just behind this big bank of clouds, so we didn't get that cool dramatic light coming in. And I took maybe 30 odd shots kind of just standing there with my camera on a tripod, waiting and waiting and waiting. I was probably there about 40 minutes until I decided, yeah, it's done, let's go home. So we have got touches of light, just a little bit down here, and I'm going to try and emphasize what we've got so that this isn't a failure of an image. There's definitely something more that we can pull back. Start off with a crop, and I'm going to do a 4x5 on this. I'm just going to bring it in slightly because it's quite a long scene, and we've got empty sky at the top, and we've got these railings and bits of tree at the bottom. So whenever I'm doing a crop, I will always want to just pay attention to those edges and just really think about the composition and the scene I've got. And if there are elements that are just redundant, in this case, just these tops of this railing here, think about maybe how you can crop in away from that and really drawing the eye to the main part of your image, which obviously in this case is the street, the tower, the buildings, etc. So I'm going to tighten it up a little bit more, move it to something like this. I don't think it needs straightening up. I think we're okay, or maybe it does. Yes, it does actually. Something like that. I'm doing this by eye. There are tools that you could probably use to do it a little bit better, but I'm not using them because I can't be bothered. Does that look right? It's fine for now. Okay, it's fine. Let's start off with a bit of a, I suppose a bit of a cheat, but in using a preset of some kind, I'm going to have a little browse through, and I say this every time I use presets when I'm doing one of these videos, is that there's nothing wrong with using presets. There's some photographers have a little bit of a I don't know, stick up their arse, I suppose, about using them, and that it's a cheat and it's not really yours. You're just downloading a photographer's presets and stuff. And I totally agree. If all you're doing is downloading, say, Pete McKinnon's preset pack and pressing it and then calling your image done, but instead it's about how you apply it and then how you do your edits over the top and how you make your image your own. Whereas what I like is having various presets, and I can literally just roll my mouse over the top and use it as inspiration about kind of how you can transform this image. I really like. I quite like this. I also really like the blue tones that we get from A5 RAW half. These are Visco presets, sort of like quite filmic ones. So I do, yeah, I do like using them, and I do use them. And what I might show as well is how I take this further by using them in Photoshop, where you can also then use them as layers, which is great. So I'm going to apply A6 RAW half just to begin with. I'm going to pull down the shadows a very small amount, because that's just going to help increase that contrast and help carve out where the light is coming and where the shadows are. I'm going to do the same by increasing the whites, and I'm going to slightly bring down the highlights. I'm not going to touch clarity or dehaze at this point. I'm also not touching my white balance, because I quite like the as shot white balance. Yeah, I don't really want to warm it up. Maybe that much, a really small amount. We've got Secret Agent Sam in the comments saying hello. Hello. Thank you for joining. Thank you so much to everyone who does join live for these streams. I don't get a lot of people joining in for them, which sometimes can make it a little difficult kind of sitting here broadcasting live when there's not tons of people around, but there's some familiar names that come back again and again. That's always really nice, feeling like I'm kind of hanging out with you guys doing this, which is great. And of course, if you're not watching this live, you're watching it afterwards. I'm not having a go. I'm not saying that I don't appreciate anyone watching. Just that it's sometimes embarrassing doing it live. It's kind of like in the same way when I'm actually filming my videos, if I'm out and about trying to like vlog to a camera, I hate doing that. If there are people around, I just feel like an idiot holding up a camera with a mic on it, talking into it, doing the whole YouTuber thing, because I'm no YouTuber. You can tell I'm no YouTuber. Look at what I'm doing. This is not good. Right, we're back in our HSL panel. We're starting off with our hues. We're grabbing our yellows, we're moving them down, we're taking that greeny yellow that we've got and trying to make it a little bit more of a rich orangey yellow. We're not changing it completely, we're just giving it a little tweak, and already that is real subtle, but it's just giving it a little bit more warmth in those tones. It's giving it a bit more of the impression that we have got this sunlight coming in from the side, which is lovely. The blues I'm just going to knock down a little bit because the sky is a bit on the purpley side. Saturation, what's those oranges? Yeah, let's boost those oranges. Let's make this a little bit more vibrant, actually. So they've been boosted. The blues have been brought down, which I'm okay with. -15. Let's boost them. Let's reduce them a little bit more. Luminance. This again is going to be a good place to emphasize that feeling that there's sun coming in, because as you can see, most of our yellows is where our highlights are. Pay attention to these little bits where the sun's just kissing the side of the tower. As I move that yellow up and down, you can see just how much more that sunlight seems to be coming in. So if we increase the yellow, then go back to our saturation, increase that saturation, because usually when you make a color lighter, it becomes less saturated. Go back into our hues and just knock that a little bit down so it's sort of matching the warmer tones of the rest of the image. And now if we turn the HSL tab off, look at how much of a difference that is making. It's gone from being a bit of a weak source image. Suddenly we've got some really nice vibrant tones in there, which I'm really, really pleased with. If we turn the whole thing back to original, and now we've just spent a few minutes, a few edits, and I think we've already got something pretty nice. But pretty nice only goes so far. So let's keep on going. And I'm going to now go to our local adjustments. And the first thing I'm going to do is bring in a radial filter right down the middle of a street. Something like this. Resets that clarity. No, the dehaze, sorry. And I'm going to up our whites. Not that much. And I'm going to up the clarity. And again, kind of as we found with the reflections on the pavement in the previous shot, it's really helping carve out some of the way that the light reflects on the wet bits of the ground, which I just think in this instance makes this pop a lot more. But it's just the roads that we're kind of carving out with it, which is great. We could maybe go a bit more with the whites. We don't want to go overboard, because if it gets too bright, it looks too fake and weird. So we want to keep these edits fairly subtle, but it's by building up multiple subtle edits rather than going at it with a sledgehammer. That's when you get a more polished looking finished image. And there's no reason why you can't go back later. You know, that filter is still there. I can go back in, I can click on it, I can edit it how I want. It's not done until we're done. Okay, next up, I'm going to use a brush, and I'm going to do some dodging and burning, which means selectively brightening or darkening certain areas of the image. And in order to do this, reset my dehaze, slightly increase the exposure, and also slightly increase the clarity, because I do want to help carve out some of the details on the buildings, which is where we're going to paint this in. Now, I'm using quite a low flow. In fact, I'm going to bring that flow down to 20%, which means that every time I brush with the effect, it's only applying 20%. So I need to brush 5 times to build up the full amount. It just allows you to paint it in and gradually build up the effect. So as we do, paint it on there, a little bit here, here, down here. There are lots of ways of dodging and burning. You can do it in Photoshop, you can do it in Lightroom. I actually don't think that's enough exposure. Let's bring it up even more. Let's go to town on this a bit. Highlights down. Okay, we're brushing in here, brushing in on top of there. What I'm looking for are details that have already got a little hint of highlight coming in. And I'm taking that highlight and I'm going to try and emphasize it a little bit more. So I did up here where you can see the sun is hitting this top bit of the building, but I'm not doing the bottom bit. I'm going to do these sides of the buildings. I've done around here. I did this bit of Royal British Hotel that you can see. I'm going to do this side of this little bit. And it's pretty rough. If we have a look, if we look at where this mask is, you know, this is a pretty rough bit of effect that I'm painting in. I'm not having to like select a certain area using different tools. I'm just roughly painting it in. But because we're using, firstly, we're using a big feather, which means a soft edge. And because we're using that low flow, it's just allowing the effect to be gradually painted in, and it blends more naturally with the rest of the image. Now we can do it on the clock face, help that pop out a bit more. Okay. So let's have a look at this from a distance, and if we just turn off that tool and back on, if you flick it on and off really quickly, it's quite obvious what you've done, but no one's seeing that. No one's on your Instagram account turning your individual tools on and off. Instead, you're seeing the finished thing, and I don't think you'd necessarily look at that and go, oh yeah, I can see exactly what you've done, unless maybe you are very good with Lightroom and can analyze all these things, because I wouldn't be able to tell. I'm just not that good with Lightroom. I'm bringing the highlights down though, because I just want it to be a little bit more of a natural blend. And I'm also going to increase the temperature, not loads, otherwise it goes very orange, but enough just because we're trying to emphasize that warm sunlight coming in. So warming it up does just allow it to look more like warm sun hitting it, which is obviously what we're going for. So let's close down that tool. And now we can, no, let's not turn it off yet. I'm going to bring in a graduated filter, just a square one. This one I'm going to use a darker exposure. I'm just going to bring it in at the bottom. That's darkening the bottom of the scene. The reason is because down here, kind of like we did with the crop, is that we've got a lot of sort of extra details that don't really belong. I don't want in it. Just these dead twigs that are sort of cluttering up the scene. A bit of a bus which hasn't quite left the frame and is not quite in it. We've got the back of a van, and I don't want to Photoshop those elements out. I just want to draw the eye away from them. So basically what I'm doing is hiding them from view. The one problem I have done with this filter, though, is because it's quite dark, it's affecting this building on the left too much. It's fallen completely into blackness. It doesn't look great. It looks also quite obvious. I've just used this filter. So what I'm going to do is, when this is selected, I'm going to go to Brush. I'm going to bring up the Erase tool, and I'm going to click Show Selected Mask. And now, I'm just going to turn my flow down even more. I can now erase that tool. And as I do, you can see that that red is lessening. So I'm basically just painting away that effect. It's always handy to show the mask if you're trying to edit the mask, because if you're just trying to do it by looking at where it's dark and where it's not, you don't really know exactly, and you can miss bits that end up looking a bit weird. This way you can see exactly where it is, and it doesn't need to be an exact thing, you know, it's just a little bit. It's just kind of taking the edge off that darkness, basically. Speaking of which, gin. That wasn't a good joke. So if you see that, we've brought back not loads of detail, but you can actually now see that there's a building here, and you can see that there's a tree here, where before that had fallen completely to a black point. Which I didn't want, but we've still got the effect applying to the road, it darkening down the trees and things, just enough to, if I just go and turn that off and on, you can see they are very visible, they are distracting, they draw the eye, whereas now they're still there, but we just don't notice them quite as much. Annika Brock is in the comments, says, hello, quiet workday so I can actually join you. Well, thank you very much, Annika. You are incredibly welcome. Thank you, when you are not at work, for using your precious time to join in with my ridiculous streams. It is a pleasure to have you all here. I've got quite a few people actually watching, which is really nice. I hope you're enjoying this. And as I said before, if you missed it, any questions about anything I'm doing or any comments generally about my stuff, please feel free to get into the chats. It is always lovely to hear from you, and I do like chatting to you. So here was our before. It's pretty flat. We've not got a lot going on in terms of nice tones. There's a hint of light, but it is a flat image. The sun was behind clouds. It's just not that impressive. And I think by using these tools, everything from the selective edits, the HSL tab, we've managed to bring back a lot of detail. I think it's looking really nice. I'm just going to take this a little bit further, and I'm going to take this one over into Photoshop to show you a couple of other things that I have shown before, but let's go back into it. Here's Photoshop. Hello, old friend. How are you today? I'm fine. Well, at least we know Photoshop is fine, so that's good. I'm going to apply an effect called the Autumn effect, and this is basically going to give it a sort of a soft focus, hazy glow. I'm going to show you what it is first before I explain why it can be terrible to use it. But it is very easy to do. You create a new layer from your background, you go to your levels tool, you basically ramp up the contrast, something like this. Looks great, right? No, it does not. Go back, make sure that you clip that levels adjustment to that layer. So it's only applying to that layer. We go to the layer, we go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and we apply a big old Gaussian blur. Now, here's where the magic happens. Are you ready? We take that opacity, we take it down to 0. It's disappeared completely, and now we gradually blend it back in, and look what happens as I do that. We get this glow that starts to appear. Now this has gone up to 20%, and this is when I'll tell you the problem. This effect is extremely common, too common, in a lot of landscape photography and a lot of Instagram photography. You'll see it all over the place, and a lot of the time you kind of just want to go like, buddy, just a little bit less. And so it's one that I don't like to overuse, but it can be really important. I showed it on a previous video when it was like a woodland scene, and one of the reasons why I really enjoyed applying it to that woodland scene is because the camera I was shooting on is a Canon 5D4. It was 34 megapixels. Digital cameras have a quite digital look to them, where everything's very sharp, and it's almost like you've applied clarity to the image because all of those tiny fine details pop out, and as a result it can kind of look a little bit unnatural. It looks too sharp, it looks too digital. So actually applying the Autumn effect is almost like unsharpening that image and making it less digital, giving it almost a filmic vibe. Which is great. It just kind of softens those details. That's looking close, and I'm only taking it to 12%. And if we just turn that off and on, look at what it's kind of doing to these details. It's giving them a little glow. It's softening them, and it's adding a really nice ethereal effect. So you can use it to create like a dreamy effect, as we've done here at 12%, or you can just use it much less, at maybe even just around 4%. It's be a lot more subtle, but it's just taking the edge off, and that's quite important if you are, as I say, finding that maybe scenes with a lot of texture are just a little bit overpowering. You can just use this just to take the edge off. I'm actually going to use it a little bit more. I tend to find that my personal sweet spot is actually at around 8%, where you definitely kind of get that slight hazy, dreamy, almost fantasy effect, but it's not so overpowering that you look at it and go, oh yeah, Autumn effect. It is noticeable. Actually, it's quite noticeable on this image, but again, we're trying to transform this image from a dull shot into something different, so I don't mind it here. I'm happy to go a bit bigger on that effect. I was also talking before about how I like to layer presets rather than just using the one, and we layer this by using layers in Photoshop. So I'm going to create a new layer on top of these, merge visible. Now this is just a new layer with that Autumn effect applied, basically giving us a new base image. I'm also going to duplicate that because on this new layer I'm going to go to Filter, camera raw filter, and this is going to bring up the exact same tools that we have in Lightroom, including all the presets, which is important because now we can have another look through the Visco presets, and I can be paying attention basically to what it's doing to the highlights. In this, it's kind of warming them up. If we go before, it's definitely giving a sort of warmer glow. This one gives it almost a vintagey sepia look, which I don't love. This is the one that we used originally, and actually kind of applying it again, I really like that. I like that as well, giving it a certain sort of poppy contrast. So how I like to work in this way is, let's say I do like this one. I'll click, I'll apply that, press OK. And now I can turn that opacity right down. And like we did with the Autumn effect, steadily build it back in until I get the effect to the point where I want. Somewhere around halfway. So it's just a little pop, just a little bit, but not loads. Whereas if we did that in Lightroom, you either apply the effect or you don't. There is no tool that allows you to dial it back, which is a real shame, and something that they frankly really do need to add. But the great thing is because we've duplicated this layer, we now can just merge that down. So now we've got a merged layer with which is at 100%, but that filter is only applied at 40 something, 47. We duplicate it again, and we go back in, and we can add another one on top. And I really like doing this because you're basically combining all these different presets, all these different subtle color shifts, which allow you to build up a completely unique look to your image. So even though you might be using presets from the world's most popular photographer, who, yeah, probably is Pete McKinnon, and you might just be one-clicking a cool summer tones preset, and it looks exactly like Pete McKinnon's. You can then layer it up with other ones and kind of take that and make it more your own style, which really is, for me, really important in photography and trying to kind of do something which looks like your own. If you can look at a whole camera roll of images from an account who maybe has reposted one of yours, and if you can still spot yours in amongst them, then I think you're onto something good. So we go and have another scroll through. See, I do quite like what this is doing, this A3. So yeah, let's stick with that. Or maybe this A4. I do like those, yeah, those orangey tones. Let's go with that. And then again, we're going to tone it right back down. I'm going to start at 0. Just build it up a little bit. So it's a small amount, but it really is. Let's zoom in here. Can you see what it's doing to the shadows on the clock? Maybe you can't. It is subtle, even to my eye. That's before it goes through YouTube's processing and the live stream and everything else. So maybe you can't tell, but hopefully, when we look at the finished image, maybe we can. Okay, I've done enough. I've shown you kind of the tools that I was wanting to use. I press save. That'll just take it back into Lightroom. And here we are. The last thing I want to do actually is just bring in another darker exposure, and I'm just going to bring, turn that off, bring it down on our sky just a little bit, because I do find that the top of the sky is a little bit too bright. So I'm just going to try and take the edge off that. No, not that much. Something like that. Just balance it a little bit more. Yeah, exactly that. So now we have a look, and we go from this, our original straight out of camera shot. It's had the crop applied, but the colors, the tones, the contrast, everything else, this is what shot the camera delivered straight away. And it's fine. If you've never seen this view before, then you might go, oh wow, what a cool view. But if you haven't if you live in Edinburgh, if you follow any like Edinburgh Instagram accounts, you will see this shot probably 5 or 6 times a day, and there are 1,000 better versions of this shot than this one, just posted this week. So yeah, competition's fierce for a good shot, but I think we've turned it into something pretty interesting. It is dramatic. It is a big edit, and frankly, this is further than I would normally take this sort of shot. It's very definitely had a lot of processing done, but I'm actually really happy with how it looks. I think it's got a lot more drama, a lot more punch. That side light coming in from the sun now has really been emphasized. It's really catching on the edges of the clock tower here and on the shop fronts down here. Yeah, so I'm really pleased with that, and that's come from a raw file which probably I may otherwise have just deleted. So it really is, there's a lot you can do in the edits. Nate is in the comments saying it's one of my favorite pics of yours from Edinburgh. Really? This one? I mean, fine. What I actually would say, just having a look, I think I prefer this version before I took it into Photoshop. This one looks too much. This one. So what I actually might do after this is layer both these images up into Photoshop, this one on top, and dial this one down to maybe like 30%, so that we just get that extra bit on top of this one. But I do prefer this one. It's a little bit more natural, a bit more subtle. Anyway, let's move on. What time are we on? It is 9:46. Oh, I said I was going to do an hour, and you know what? I'm going to try and stick to an hour. So I'm going to make the next one very quick. I'm going to try and get this one done by 10 to, and then I can spend 10 minutes on the last one. It doesn't matter if I run over a little bit. Okay. Nice shot. Again, looking towards nice old buildings in Edinburgh. It's a nice clear view up the street. I was using those road lines as a nice leading line into the scene. A couple of things that I don't like. Obviously, the conditions are really poor. There's no contrast, no light, no direction. It's very, very just bleak and underwhelming. 2, I just took this at standing high. I'm 6'2", so I was quite high over the ground. I could have emphasized those lines even more leading up if I'd have just kind of knelt down, a lower shooting angle, emphasized that, kind of leading the eye into the scene. It would have made, at this distance, would have made no difference to what the buildings in the distance look like. It may have slightly changed the geometry of the way these posts are looking, but we're going to correct that anyway. So, yeah, so there we go. Let's dive in, and straight away, having a look around, I just need to go down and turn on Enable Profile Corrections, remove Chromatic Aberration, because we had some chromatic aberration, which didn't look great. Okay, I'm going to crop in something like this. I obviously want those lines to be in the middle. I think that looks okay. But I'm just going to correct the geometry, because obviously these two streetlights should be going up, and they're not. That's easy to do. We go to the transform tool, and if you click on this guided upright tool, what you can then do is literally drag a line down and say this item should be straight up, and also Lightroom, this item should be straight up, and it goes bing, and it straightens them up. So now they are both perfectly upright, dead straight, spot on, just what we need. Okay. And right, so we're going to start off in our exposure tab. I'm not going to touch the white balance at this point because I actually kind of like the slight brown tones we've got, and I am going to try and bring those out, the natural, albeit right now dingy tones of the brickwork. We're going to bring the highlights down a bit because that's where a lot of that sky is. It's a little bit overpowering. Around there. Everything else I'm going to bring up. I'm going to bring up those shadows a bit. I'm going to bring up our whites because that is going to affect the whole scene, not just the sky. And I'm also going to bring up the black level a little bit, actually quite a bit, because it's very, very dark. So now we're on to something quite a bit brighter. Nate says, it's all the life in the old buildings I like, not specifically because it's one you took. Oh, so it's it's the view, it's your favourite view in Edinburgh, I guess, the previous shot, rather than necessarily that image, because also you haven't seen that image before. So, okay, let's turn our vibrancy down. And I know what you're thinking. Well, you want to increase the colour. Why are you removing the vibrance? Well, we grab the saturation and increase that. Now, I often will use vibrancy and saturation in opposites. I might bring the vibrance down and boost the saturation, or I might bring the vibrance up and remove the saturation, because they apply colour in different ways, and I don't really know exactly what the actual differences are. I just know that I often like the look using them in one way or the other. So that is what I'm doing. By the way, I keep looking over here, and it's because I did do a couple of test edits on this, and I wrote down some notes. So I'm basically just trying to follow said note. In fact, you know what? I don't need to hide the notes anymore. I've acknowledged their existence. So there they are. To be honest, all I wrote for this was highs down, others up, which meant highlights down, and the rest up. So there you go. Those were my edit notes. Let's again apply one of our styles, our presets, and actually I'm just going to go with A6 because it needs quite a boost rather than the half one. A6 straight in. So again, that's made a big difference right off the bat to our contrast. Hues we're going to play with as well. We're going to drop those yellows because that preset had kind of taken them to a greeny yellow. We don't want that. Bring them back down into a more into a deeper one. Slightly bring the oranges down, but not a lot because they quickly go pink. They're not pink. They're really not. So just a little bit. Again, just making that making those colors just a little bit more rich. And actually we can so see my count. We can try and carve out some of the detail with the luminance. There's not a lot of yellow luminance going on. That's okay. But the oranges, there is a bit more. And then in saturation, we can boost those oranges, boost those yellows, maybe a little bit less, quite a lot less. And actually now I've boosted the orange, maybe they could go a little bit down. Something like that, maybe a little bit more. Okay, I'm going to leave that for now. We can come back to those and probably will do. But the next thing I'm going to do is use a selective brush again, and I'm going to increase, I'm going to leave the exposure where it is. I'm going to increase the whites, and again, that clarity, maybe a touch of dehaze. And I'm going to just paint that over the buildings here, and here, and a little bit here. And on these, I'm basically trying to individually carve out the fronts of the building where the light is sort of hitting them a little bit more, in order to make them stand out as individual buildings rather than just as one kind of flat grey-brown mass as they were before, because they are individual buildings. And just by kind of brushing this on steadily, building the effect up as we go, carving out those details. That's already looking better, I think. Let's just turn that brush off and on. It's not loads of it, not loads has changed, but I just think it's just helping them pop out that bit more. They just stand out from the scene. It's not so much just a flat load of nothing. So we're going to go back. We're going to create a new tool. This one writes white up, clarity right up, and I just want to paint it on. You know what? Up the exposure too. Quite a lot. I'm going to paint it in here and really up that reflection. And I'm going to do the same bigger brush on here. These were wet grounds. I want them to look wet. In fact, I might even do the same on the tarmac of this road. Yes. Suddenly it looks slick now. Don't you think it looks slick? Downside is that I think it's sort of given a bit of a halo around that man, or maybe it hasn't. Maybe it's just the way I've painted it. It is the way I've painted it. We're fine. It's fine. I can turn that down a bit. Okay. Yeah. So I think that is already looking a lot better to my eye. I'm going to now, I've just increased that detail. I am now going to darken down just that bottom bit. Again, it's just about helping the eye be drawn through the image, away from the bottom. Your eye is drawn naturally towards the brighter parts of the image. This is just helping draw that eye through into the scene. Of course, that does mean, really, by that rule, all you're going to look at is that white, overpowering sky. So it is a real shame that that sky is there, but there's nothing we can do about it. Even if we put in a filter and try to bring the exposure down, there's no detail to bring back. Not really. There's a little bit of cloud there, but we'd have to do so much work on anything else that I just don't think it's going to be worth doing. We can try anyway. Let's do that. And another tool is the range mask, where you can tell Lightroom that you don't want an effect to be applied to certain parts of the scene. That you can say, do not apply it to dark areas or light areas. In this case, we don't want it applying to the dark areas, the buildings. So we bring it up, and as we do, you'll see it's disappearing from the buildings and from these things. Now if we do that, I mean, it is helped a bit. Let's do it less to around there. Yeah, you know what? Okay, that has helped. It's less of a bright, overpowering white mass. It's now back to being boring grey clouds. So hooray for me. We've won. I do like this. You know, this is kind of where we were. We've brought out a lot of detail, a lot of nice contrast. Maybe we could boost those whites a little bit more. What about bringing the shadows back, actually? A little bit. Again, upping that contrast. Let's go to our color grading. And what I'm going to just try doing is putting a little bit of blue in the shadows, just doing a bit of color toning. So I'm going to steadily increase that saturation. Something like that. A little bit more. Turn that off. Turn it on. Yeah, just giving it a little extra something, a little slightly sort of cinematic feel. And we do the same in the highlights. I want to add some warmth, some orange to those highlights. So we're going to bring that saturation up there. And we can play the luminance at this point as well, but I think we've done enough. Now if we turn it off and on, I think that's just added an extra little something. It's just bringing in some more color tones. It's toning separately our shadows and our highlights, which is just, you know, is it necessary? No, not necessarily, but we are trying to create hopefully something that might even pass for a piece of art from something which was frankly very, very dull and forgettable. Because let's face it, we've all taken shots like this that are just grey when maybe we've gone on holiday. Remember holidays? We've gone somewhere and we've, you know, been excited to take some nice photos, and the weather was awful, the clouds were there, and we've come away feeling disappointed because we look at our photos on the back of our camera and they're just grey. They're just kind of nothing. But actually, if you just spend the time kind of going through these different tools in Lightroom and applying things, you can pull back something that's maybe not your favorite work. It's certainly not something that would sit in my portfolio, but it could help you create, you know, capture maybe more of your memory than you had. That's not the right way of saying it. You know what I mean, though. You know, you've got a nice memento from from the place where you visited. Maybe you visited Edinburgh just this once and this is all you saw. Well, now you've got something that's a little bit more standout that you look back on in years to come and be, oh yeah, that was cool, that was good, that was a good place. So so there we go. There's that shot. John Garnham is in the comments saying, well, obviously I should have been watching this all evening. That is producer John, to those of you who are fans of Outside Extra and Outside Xbox. And John Garnham is genuinely one of my favorite people in the entire world, which I say with absolutely zero shred of humor. He is a superb gentleman. And I think he was watching.
I didn't catch that. Could you try again?
Oh, Siri. I think not.
Hi, Andrew.
No, we've had enough of you. Quiet time. Where were we? Photos. I remember. I'm going to call this shot done. I think we've come a decent way, and also I took 15 minutes to do it, and I said I'd take 5. So there you go. Sometimes it does happen a little bit longer, but there we go. Okay, let's move on then to, I'm going to call this our final image. I'm not going to do the other ones because they're crap. This one, which looks like even the worst of all of the images, and you'd be absolutely right. Clearly, first thing we need to do is really ramp up that exposure to a hideous amount, plus whatever that is, 1.84. Yeah, and let's bring up those shadows. I want this to be fairly moody, actually, so I don't want to make it too bright. It was a dark day, certainly at this point. It wasn't quite... I don't think the street lamp works because other street lamps were on, but we are going to come back to this one. I'm going to change this to a 4:5 aspect ratio, because that's just narrowing in, bringing in that bottom section and getting rid of that top. Again, think about your compositions. Think about how a good crop could bring those details in. Something like this, I think, is looking good. Is that straight? No, it's definitely not straight. Is that straight? That looks a lot better. Something like that. And let's just shift it back. Cool. Okay, that's looking a little bit better, I think. I'm going to warm it up just a touch. A small touch. I'm going to bring that tint down because it's looking a little purple. Again, we're going to go through our color toning. We're going to apply A6 half. I like what that's doing. And one of the reasons I thought about maybe turning this into a black and white, and I don't hate it as a black and white, but the problem that I've got with turning this potentially to black and white is that there's so little light falling on anything that the only real separation we've got between the different elements, between things like, the ground, the steps, this building, the grass and the rock and the cast in the background, is the different colors. This is clearly orange. The ground is more of like a slate blue. We've got some greeny tones here. And so that is the only thing that's allowing us to see that these are kind of different elements. As soon as we get rid of those colors, we're relying on light and shadow again, and there just isn't that much light and shadow. So that is kind of usually how I decide whether or not I want to go black and white. Black and white is great if you've got amazing contrast, and I love shooting black and white, and I don't do it often enough, but I will be doing some more if that's of interest. In fact, if it's not, I'm going to do it anyway. Okay, we're going to lean quite heavily on selective edits in this shot. In particular, upping that exposure for now. With a shot like this, I do feel that I will need to increase the clarity, because if you just increase exposure on just dark, something that was really dark, when you bring that exposure back, it's just going to look quite flat. It's going to look almost grey rather than black. So just having a little bit of that clarity in there helps keep those details. So I'm painting it in on this building and around here. In fact, a lot of this scene, I'm basically going to be painting the light back in. fact, we could maybe go brighter. And I could maybe increase the whites. Shadows even a touch. Yep, we're going to be going big on this brush. Strap in, folks. We got some brushing to do. And we're going to basically paint it over most of the scene. And you will see, I hope, once we get to the end of this, how being selective with these edits, brushing in these tones, is already, I think, looking better than if we just kept on increasing the exposure. If you use these tools, as in these ones, the regular increase exposure, it just increases the exposure of everything in your scene. And so everything becomes too bright, and the highlights are raised the same amount as the shadows. You don't necessarily want that to be the case. This way you're putting the light in exactly where you want it. That's why it's an incredibly powerful tool. And it's, I think, the way that you get the most, well, it's not, I don't think, it is the way you get most control over your edits. But I use it in a way that hopefully will kind of make sense when you look at the image, in that I'm trying to look at where the light already is and then putting in light. If I see a shot where there is light and shadow and I try and brighten up the shadow to the same amount, it's just going to look odd. It's not going to look good. I'm not going to try and brighten up this rock up here. I am going to try and apply a little bit to the castle, but again, only where there already is that light. For example, it was on this bit here, but not this darker bit around here, because you want to maintain the contrast. We're trying to, we're trying to really kind of sculpt this image, bring out those details, and you can't do that if you just put it everywhere. Okay. Brush tool comes back. No, wait, I've closed it. Brush tool now comes back. Increase the exposure, really increase the clarity this time, because we're going to do the exact same thing we did before to the ground. It's wet, there is some light reflection on there, but we want to increase that even more going down, the way that that light is kind of coming in and hitting it. So we're brightening things up bit by bit. And now if we look before, it's basically in blackness. And now we are starting, slowly but surely, to carve out some nice details. It's not straight though, is it? Is it? That's a bit better. I think maybe I need to use a geometry tool, because I think some bits are, this edge is, but this edge seems to be leaning in. You've seen how I use that. We can come back to that at some point. Okay. I mean, okay, what we could do, speaking of increasing things, this street light, let's see if we can turn it on. I don't think there's a bulb in it. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe that's why it isn't on. The other ones were. There's one behind me about here which was on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset this effect, show selected mask. I'm going to bring in a small radial filter, just like that. Hide the mask. And now we up our exposure. You can see what we're doing. Up our whites, up our contrast. And here's the thing, because right now it looks fake and awful. Increase the temperature, make it a nice, warmer, yellow light as it would be coming from this kind of street light. Also up that tint, that's going to help it look a little bit more orangey and warmer. And now doesn't really work. It's too much. I need to turn it down. It's too bright. I think that looks relatively believable. Do we think? Because it wouldn't be casting a huge amount of light, so it's still clearly in the day, but it's dark enough that the street lights would be on. So what it wouldn't be doing is casting a whole load of light on the ground. So I don't need to go and paint in extra light around here, around the walls. this is still the time of day where the light would be on, but it's not dark enough to be casting its light everywhere. So I actually think that kind of makes sense. Let me know what you think. I would be interested in your thoughts on this. If I've taken the old editing a little bit too far, which is entirely possible. I'm going to bring these shadows back down because it actually is looking a little too bright in certain places. And actually, I'm going to go back into our first brush, that one, and I'm going to increase that brightness even more. This is going to end up looking a little quite fantasy, a little bit like a painting in the way that we have done this edit, because I have literally painted in the light and shadow where I want it, so it is going to look quite painterly. That's looking a bit better to my eye, and I'm going to bring in another brush, reset all the effects. This one's going to be darker, and I'm going to just darken down around here a little bit, kind of in between where we painted the light on this wall and the light on the steps. Again, we're just kind of carving out light and shadow, light and shadow. Something like that. I mean, no one's telling me I'm really wrong about that street light in the comments. So if you do like that, then great. Shout me down. This isn't necessarily my, as I say, these aren't my edits as such. I am hoping for these to be examples of what you can do to your own, rather than here is exactly how I would edit and publish an image. Okay, let's move on from our tools, and let's actually have a little look at these. Yeah, if I increase those whites, that looks kind of nice. Bring down the highlights in the sky. It is a shame about that sky. Again, it's just, as before, it's just empty. Even if we were to really lay into the edits on that sky, there's nothing to recover. There's no detail. But that's okay. We're going down to our HSL tab again. The green, I definitely want to grab hold of and ramp into the yellow, because we had this very vibrant emerald green behind there, and it was standing out. It was catching my eye because it's so vibrant against everything else which isn't. So I want to bring it down, not all the way to the bottom as I did before, about halfway. I'm just going to also decrease its saturation. Now people are talking about the bulb. Adding the light was magic, says Shy Violet, and lovely John Garnham says the bulb looks believable, which is exactly what I needed to hear. Thank you, John. Okay, back in our saturations. What's our blue doing? I might bring the blue down a little bit. Maybe bring the saturation of it down. Something around there. Again, moving around the luminance tabs can be really good. If you, for example, on here, I still want this building to kind of pop out from the scene more. Most of that colours is in the yellow channel. So as you can see, as I'm sort of pumping this yellow up and down, more of those details are being brought out, which looks great. Just going to increase that. Maybe just a little bit less with the oranges, but just a touch. And in the hue, I'm going to bring that yellows down. And the orange I'm going to leave exactly where it is, because it's orange enough. I don't want to take it into the reddy pinks. It's at a really nice believable point right now. I think there is some purple. In fact, there is. If we look particularly in around where the tree is, there is a lot of purple in that sky, which is just a color correction thing. So I'm going to correct that by just getting rid of the purple, turning it into blue. Spot on. Spot on. Okay, I think that's probably it in terms of our HSL tab. I think that's looking okay. But let's go right back to the bottom and let's have a look at our camera calibration, see if there's any tweaks we might want to make here. Maybe dragging that blue primary down. As we do, this is one of those tools that, again, can be very Instagrammy, because you start to pull this down and then those oranges turn pink and your blues turn very cyan. So you can drag that down, drag your saturation up, export, publish to Instagram, 10,000 likes. I don't like it. I just don't. I like that color combination. It works. That's color theory. That's why that is a popular thing. Those two colors do go well together, but not to such a huge degree. Something around there, I think, works really nicely. It's more subtle. We can play around with the greens, but I don't actually want to at all. Let's just undo that. Could even reduce the greens, or just increase that saturation a little bit. And the reds, I'm going to leave here. But I'm not going to play with the saturation. So it's definitely given some more pop. And it's helped turn quite a slight purpley twinge to the ground. It's made it a little bit more blue, which I like. Same with the sky. And again, it's kind of brought out a richness to the brickwork on these buildings, which I'm really pleased with. So if we have a look before, this was our starting image, which you could really look at and think, yeah, it's awful. You delete that. I would say I'd intentionally underexpose this by quite a lot because I wanted to make sure that I was capturing detail in the sky. I didn't want the sky to be blown out white, and I didn't want to have the problem where if you overexpose a sky to such a degree that it starts to bleed into the building around it, in this case the castle, you get that kind of hazy edge where it's just been so overpoweringly bright. So I exposed for the sky by pointing the camera at it, half pressing my shutter, allowing it to meter for that sky, reframed my shot, took my image. As a result, it's really dark, but we've been able to pull so much out from it. I think there's probably a little bit more we could do with it. Let's bring those highlights back. Oh yeah, that's immediately made this so much better. Bringing those highlights back in. Could maybe even time to bring those oh yeah, now we're talking. Now we're getting to a moody thing. This is Birkin hair stalking through the night sort of image now. I'm liking this. Oh yeah, I am. Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm getting excited now because I'm liking an image. This is what happens. I am gonna darken that sky a little bit more. Not that much. Just that. Just, again, taking the edge off. Something like that. I don't need to do the range mask thing. But the other thing, maybe I could add some... Okay. I'm going to leave this one in. And now I'm going to bring in a big radial filter. And this one is going to be dehaze, because I want to see, let's just see what happens if we try and make it look a bit more foggy by adding in, John, remember Foggy the Owl? Adding in some of that sort of hazy mist over the top of our castle. Not that much. Obviously not that much, but just enough. Darkening it as well, because when you reduce the contrast, reduce the dehaze, looks a bit brighter. So I just brought it back down. Let's just turn that off and back on. I like that. Let me know what you think. I think that adds, or rather maybe just reduces, how much the castle stands out. Because at the moment, it feels... So here's my theory. My bad theory. It feels to me like there's two subjects. Your eye's being drawn to kind of the bright area on here. It's being led down this alleyway, down these steps. but also the castle stands out so much that that's almost its own subject. And it's not that I want to get rid of the castle. Of course that's a subject. Of course that is like such an important part of this scene. But I want it just to be a bit more subtle. I want it to be there, but it isn't pulling focus. Your eye moves through the scene up towards it. It's like you go down this alleyway to look at the castle. And it's a small amount, but I think that works. I do. I might just warm it up to make it blend with this scene a little bit more. I could even darken it down a bit more. What do we think? Do let me know. Genuinely, let me know to this, because now I'm getting a bit more experimental, I suppose. Gary Merlin is in the chat. Regular viewer Gary Merlin. Thank you so much, Gary, for joining. Actually, Gary left a very interesting comment, which I haven't yet replied to, asking about how I decide how to do some dodging and burning. If you just joined this, Gary, I would encourage you to sort of go back when you can and watch from the start, because I did talk a lot about dodging and burning, particularly in this image, and how for me, dodging and burning, like I try and emphasize what is there. I try and carve out. In this case, I wanted the light on the side of this building to stand out more and to really pop. So that's what I tried to emphasize with my dodging and burning, and then painting in some shadow to try and basically carve into the scene extra contrast, if that makes sense. I'm not always great at explaining these things. I don't know about you, but I think I'm kind of getting to the end of this image. We've done a lot with it. It started as this near black shots with almost no detail, and now we've brought out this moody scene with rich tones. We've got the haze over the castle. I'm actually incredibly pleased with this image. I really like this. I probably will post this on Instagram. I think it's very evocative. I think it's very evocative of like old Edinburgh, that old the old town stuff. So I'm really, really pleased. And it's all been done in Lightroom. I haven't taken it into Photoshop. I haven't had to use really advanced masking. Everything has been done with the standard exposure tools, with the HSL, and of course by using selective adjustments, which I say again and again and again is the absolute number one way that you can improve your editing, is by experimenting more with selective tools. All of which I think brings me to an end to my live stream. I would thank you again so much for everyone who's joined me live, and to anyone who has got this far watching it as a on-demand version. Thank you very much. If you do have any questions about my photography, about anything I've shown in this video or any of my other ones, do please leave me a comment on my videos. I love getting comments. I love chatting back and talking about things and stuff. So please do that, and stick around on the channel. If you don't subscribe already, hopefully you like what I've been doing. If you have stuck with this stream for an hour and 25 minutes. I've got some hopefully pretty cool stuff coming up. A couple of projects that I'm going to be working on that actually I'm going to be leaning on you guys for some help with. I'm not going to say any more right now, but some good stuff coming up. So stick around, get involved, and thank you very much for joining, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.